In the summer of 2002, I got the coolest job I will ever have. I was a bouncer at the world-famous House of Blues on the Sunset Strip. How cool was it? On my first day, wearing that yellow shirt with security printed across the front, I got to hold the door open for Dolly Parton as she arrived at our club for their show that night. And she was so tiny, and her hair was so big. She walked past me, and she looked me in the eye, and she said, "How you doing tonight, honey?" And I said, actually, I don't have any idea what I said. She was kind of glowing, and I felt really warm inside. But that was far from my only celebrity encounter while I was working there. During my 15 months wearing that yellow shirt, I shared a whiskey with Lemmy from Motorhead on the back staircase of the club. I'm glad some of you guys get that because that is cool. I had a conversation with Chad Smith, the drummer from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, about how deep the song catalog of the band Foreigner was in comparison to John Cougar Mellencamp. It was detailed. I even got to card Deidre Roper. No one knows who Deidre Roper is? You may know her better as DJ Spinderella from the hip-hop act Salt and Pepper. I knew who she was because I had a pretty big crush on her when I was a kid. So I saw that name on the ID, and I'm like, well, I knew who she was, and it was her birthday. So I said, "Happy birthday!" Her friend said, "You know who this is?" I'm like, "I sure do." Celebrities excluded, I should say. I made some of my closest friends at that job. The security team, the yellow shirts, was like a band of brothers and sisters. There was Nano, the short kid from Chicago with the warm smile and wicked temper. There was Holly, the tattooed punk rocker from Florida who weighed maybe 100 pounds soaking wet. Angel, the mixed martial artist from South America. And then there was Lamont, the older and wiser member of our crew, which at that time was maybe pushing 40. He was tall and he was jacked and he had the dignified air of a Shakespearean actor because that's what he was when he wasn't working with us. We were a diverse bunch, but we had one common goal, and that was to keep everyone at our venue safe. We implicitly trusted each other. We had to know if someone put a call out for help on our radio, everyone would come running. And we did. When I was at work, I felt like I was at home, which is good because outside of work, I had never felt more isolated. I had moved to LA the year previous, basically alone, and days before September 11th. The whole country was scrambling to make sense of itself in the months that followed, but it truly reflected some of what I was feeling. Now, I was in an unknown place for reasons I couldn't quite verbalize. I had no job, I had no friends, and I had no idea what I was going to do next. All my buddies in Chicago were hanging out every weekend at our favorite spots, while I lived behind a Blockbuster and an all-night Taco Bell. As the world was returning to a new normal, I was still struggling to figure out what my new normal, my LA normal, was supposed to be. Yet I had that one escape, the House of Blues, where I had at least a little bit of control. I usually work the door because, let's face it, I'm not the biggest dude on the security team. I'm not throwing guys out of their ear from the club. But I could talk good. If need be, I could explain to someone exactly why I wasn't going to let them in the club or back in the club without making them want to hit me in the face. That came in handy a lot. You know the saying, the customer's always right? Well, that's great for food service, but when you're working the door of a club, if someone has to ask you if they can do something, the answer is almost always no. Usually, you said no because you had to. Them's the rules. Sometimes, you said no because you wanted to. Like the night a middle-aged woman, let's call her, I don't know, Karen. Sorry, any Karens in the audience. She came to the club. She was standing a few feet away from me next to Angel, my fellow yellow shirt, who was wanding everyone with a metal detector before they came to me so that I could check their ID and give them a wristband for the show. I could already hear her arguing with Angel, refusing to let him wand her, getting in his face, insulting him. And before any of the rest of us could react, she barged past him and held her ticket out to me, waiting for a wristband. So Karen starts barking at me and about how she's exempt from house rules And I'm sitting there and I'm stewing in my head over the level of disrespect she showed my coworker and my friend. Until, listen, ma'am, everyone needs to be checked. It's for everyone's safety. You don't want to follow our rules? Fine. You've been disrespectful to my coworker, you've been disrespectful to me, and you're no longer welcome at our club tonight. And her jaw hit the floor. A few minutes later, she's pleading her case to the club manager. Lamont walks up behind me and in his baritone voice said, "Joe Holler, lay in the Smackdown." And from then on, that was my nickname, Smackdown. And it wasn't just a nickname, it was an alter ego. No matter how lonely and helpless I felt during the day, every night I could escape into Smackdown. I seemed to always know what to do. And Smackdown could be friendly, but he didn't have time for any of your bullshit. He could enforce the rules, but he could roll with the punches. Smackdown was fearless. I could step right between two people throwing fists and push them away from each other, and I did several times because I knew that the yellow shirt, they didn't want to hit me because they know I've got the 250-pound slabs of beef coming to back me up. Smackdown couldn't even be trifled by the shooting. Yes, there was a shooting backstage at a punk rock show one night. Long story short, someone on the band's guest list, a list that at the time did not get wanted by our metal detectors, brought a gun to the show. I remember really clearly, I was working on the balcony inside the club, and the band had just left the stage for their, after their set, and the crowd's going crazy and cheering for an encore. And the singer comes back out by himself and said, "Well, we were going to play another song for you, but someone just got shot." And I thought he was joking. And there was this weird hesitation, and then in my earpiece, I'm like, is he kidding? Because none of us knew what was happening. I looked down, and the guys working the mosh pit, like at the front of the stage, they're looking around, trying to figure out what he's talking about. It turns out that the shooting had happened backstage right at the end of the set, and the shooter fled out of the venue before we were even aware of it. And I tell these stories, and I know I should have been scared in those moments, but I just wasn't. And maybe it was the adrenaline, maybe just a lack of self-preservation, but that job, those nights working at the House of Blues, becoming Smackdown, that was my escape from the self-doubt that I was facing alone. And by the time I hit my 1-year anniversary at the House of Blues, I had earned the respect of my peers. I was trusted, and I was loved. And I even had an extra responsibility, training new hires. And then a funny thing happened. Smackdown followed me home. And he didn't have time to dwell on missed opportunities. He was looking for his next adventure. He was ready to take chances, to put himself out there, to keep going. Almost 2 years after moving, an old coworker of mine from my time in Chicago connected me with some friends at VH1. I got a job working on Behind the Music. Another friend hooked me up freelancing for the LA Downtown News, which then led to a few other freelance writing gigs. I buried myself in that work, making up for lost time. And eventually, I didn't need that escape to the House of Blues. As for Smackdown, well, he still shows up from time to time when needed. It was almost a sold-out show tonight, so I was ready to turn him away. He shows up in ways big and small, most of the time when my kids aren't listening to me. And I still have my yellow shirt, just in case.